Welcome back to HawgCast, the official podcast of the 442nd Fighter Wing. I'm Bob Jennings, the Superintendent of Public Affairs, and I'm sitting here with Colonel Mike Rio Leonas and Chief Master Sergeant Nate Parks, the incoming Command Chief for the wing. And also our guests today are Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Nomar Geidel and Captain Lauren Haythorne. More on that in a minute, but first, it's Babble Time.
It is Babble Time, Bob, and the reward for guessing Babble Time's up to $175,075.
No, you keep going with that.
Yeah, I would start really putting in some work if it was $175,000.
I've been embezzling money a little bit there, if I can throw that around. $175. The hint from last podcast was Davis Mothin, and the hint for this podcast is the 354th Fighter Squadron Bulldogs. So those are the hints. Hopefully someone will be able to guess it. But we've had two busy UTAs, and we're going to wrap them both up today on Babble Time, being that I did not get to wrap up the August UTA. Awesome RIMPAC interview coming up, and that was a huge international joint exercise, and you're going to get to hear about that. What are we doing? The last two UTAs is we were getting ready for the ACS package to go out the door, and we're deploying almost 100 members to so many different locations, mostly in CENTCOM, but some in CONUS. We actually had some Niger taskings that were initially forecast, but they got turned off, which was interesting, and they got re-rolled, some of them. We're also getting ready for the aviation package as well, which is coming up later next year. Other things we're working on is obviously been talking about fiscal execution, and we're wrapping up the fiscal year, and FM has been really good. And I think we're going to have a very successful closeout, trying to spend to zero. And everybody who listening can help us with that by filing their travel vouchers, not changing their orders, and not changing the plans, especially at the end of the fiscal year. Those are some things that we're working on. Also, we've broken out the Protect Patch initiative there, Chief. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so just back to some basics here and making sure that we're not embarrassing our patch in any way, whether that's the Air Force Reserve Command patch or, more importantly, the 442nd patch, or even that patch that you wear over your chest. And so it's just making sure that we're upholding all the standards from everything from the TOs that we're working with out there, whether you're in ammo or you're in maintenance or you're in ops or you're anything, just following those TOs to a T, making sure that we're keeping everybody safe going after that. And even into the 362903, we know that there's been a lot of changes to personal dress and appearance, and it's each of ours responsibility to make sure that we're upholding those standards.
Yep, job standards, flight discipline. There's been a lot of things that accumulated this thought and pressure. Pressure is maybe not the right word, but thought and initiative from not us only, but it goes all the way up the chain of command, NAF commander, AFRIC commander, and quite honestly, it's coming from DOD top levels. And just something that makes sense. Protecting the patches, it makes sense. It's a privilege to serve in the Air Force, let alone in our fighter wing.
Truly is.
Absolutely. Keeping the patch shiny and above standards is what we're looking for doing. Those are some things that we broke out these UTAs. We had some huge events in August. Lieutenant Colonel Chevalier took command of the MXG. He goes way back in our unit, and he has some assignments away, but he is an absolute perfect person to take that role, and we're excited that he took that role. Bob, what happened to you on the 3rd?
I actually deployed with Chevalier.
Did you really?
In 2014.
On the 3rd? 2014. So did I.
And, fantastic leader. So thrilled.
Absolutely. I forgot that he was the captain downrange, so that's awesome. That was a great deployment, and I forgot you were there.
Great mentor, great leader. Thrilled to see.
And you deployed as a maintenance troop. Awesome. That's great. That was a good deployment, except for the rocket attack.
And it's a good move immediately afterward to PA before I hurt myself or somebody else.
Yeah, I was trying to get to what happened to you on the 3rd, which is...
But no, on the 3rd, I retired.
Yep, absolutely. Awesome. Congratulations, Master Sergeant retired Bob Jennings. We're proud to have you on as a civilian and helping continue the PA press as we go. Master Sergeant Lori Peterson also retired. And she's been a long member, came up through the medical squadron. She came over as a medical technician to the fighter squadron. And then she eventually made it into the first sergeant roles, where she was an awesome first sergeant. And then she went over the IG and closed out her career. Sorry to see her go, but she was a huge impact to our wing. Recruiter Senior Master Sergeant Thames retired as well. And then Chief Master Sergeant Aaron McRoberts came back and retired at Whiteman Air Force Base. He was a command chief at Luke.
Yeah, he was a fixture around here for a long time.
Absolutely. Tail number 164 still has his switches that he used to polish as a crew chief. Yeah. And you can tell it's a little bit different. And that's the exceptional attention to detail that he brought that got him to be a command chief for Luke. And the Luke wing commander, Colonel Riddle, came and retired him here at Whiteman. So that is a huge thing. And then probably one of the most prolific Finney flights that I've seen happened on Friday, the 23rd, where Lieutenant Colonel John Kuda, or Karl Marx, retired the day after, but his Finney flight was on the 23rd, and it was quite an event. And we have a story out for that, but it was quite an event. And what I'd say the summary is he, no kidding, in the audience had his optometrist that he was seeing as a kid or growing up that told him how to get through the eye exam and hit 20/20 because he wasn't quite 20/20. So that, we'll call it technique, TTPs to pass the eye test, started that man's career, and he had 7,506.
Yeah, what a legend.
What a legend. Absolute legend. What people probably don't track is he actually won HawgSmoke 2 years ago. So he's the oldest guy, 58 years old, and he's flying up in Boise, Idaho, and they were doing radar jamming or GPS jamming, and he was actually going up and down in the little ripples of the terrain where the rest of the A-10 pilots were just going straight across, and they were getting jammed and he was not. So he won HawgSmoke there.
It'd be interesting to see how many of his 7,506 hours were overflies, right? Because when I was a 1 Charlie here, he was notorious for
it was only 4,000 hours.
Yeah, it was a 1.5 is he'd fly a 2.0 or a 2.2 majority of the time.
Yeah, so, I agree with you.
The Finney flight was definitely an overfly.
Yeah, that's it.
It was the first.
Nothing less.
He asked for a landing extension, which was the first time he probably ever had done.
Asked. Yeah,
we approved it, and he was actually in good spirits. He did not. There was not a negative emotion coming out of him, which was a surprise. Some of us were upset, but he was fired up, ready to go his next stage of his life, which is racing cars. And I think maybe that's really his passion because he loves cars. He loves restoring cars. And he's just here's a good story. One time we were going off base in one of my cars. It was a Ford Escape, and he said it wasn't sounding real good. So we pulled over and he checked the oil, and it's 3 quarts low. No kidding. So he saved my car. But yeah, he loves cars, and he will move on to racing his Challenger. And it's a gorgeous car, and we got some pictures of that next to the A10.
I think, too, with a lot of these people coming out the door, that's a lot of experience. That's a lot of experience, and that's a lot of knowledge and wisdom. And it's each of our part to play now, to step up and to fill those voids. But also, it's always neat in these times to see who's going to step up.
Absolutely.
And fill in.
Good point. Yeah, someone said that, hey, we had by far the most hours average per pilot until Kuda retired.
Yeah, then
now
drop
it's just barely above the standard there. All right, we had an awesome backpack drive. Shout out to Amy Gerardo, Bill Dorman, and Sadie Gonzalez. And I know there was others that helped. I'm sure Military Family Readiness got that going, but what a great backpack drive. And all the first sergeants helped with that as well. I think we gave out, God, I don't want to use the wrong number, but almost 100 backpacks to children and kids that need them as they go to school. So that's awesome. We had a Cannon Range open house down at Cannon Range. Apparently they had 1,400 people. It was a little Army-centric, a little Fort Leonard Wood centric. I think we missed the boat on that. We'll try to get more people from our wing down to the next one. And then awesome E-to-O conditioning board. We selected 4 members of this wing. We started the Fighter Wing DEOX, which is going to run through November. And we customized, I think, about 25% of the questions, but the other 75 are stock. Hopefully we've identified weak points in our wing, and you'll be able to respond to those.
That's direct feedback right to us.
Absolutely.
And not only that, is most people don't realize, is that we have to respond to all of those. So the DEOX pieces that come out, is we respond to those, and we will brief those up to the wing on what the results were. And so this is really a chance for your voice to be heard. And historically, it's crazy. It's 15 to 17% of people that are participate in this. And so this is that time, if you've ever been sitting around at lunch and you're like, man, if I was in charge, this is what I'd do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, tell us what you would do and what we can be doing differently, and at least give us a shot.
Yes, we coined Jeremy Fly for actually the A1, Africa A1.
Story.
Amazing story where he basically saved a life on the middle of the road during a snowstorm. And I think it was in February. And the A1 recognized him as part of their Community Action Network team. And one of the things, if you don't tell me what's going on, I can't fix it. Tell us and we'll fix it. So I think we're at 16% on the DEOX. So
good. Let's keep it going.
Let's keep it going. We're going through November, and we'll keep charging away on that. We've got the Vietnam Traveling Memorial came through Sedalia, I believe, at the fair. And that was, I think we had a couple members.
Pretty awesome, yeah.
It is. You've obviously seen the real one in DC. It's a solemn, I think the word you used. It's definitely solemn. And I think the traveling one was also the same. So hopefully some of our members got out there. we've got some wing positions coming up that we're advertising for.
I think when we look at these wing positions, there's positions out here that are full-time orders. And sometimes people look at these positions and are like, TAP program. I don't have any interest in being the transition assistant program manager. But what we got to start looking at is what can that lead to? What's your ultimate goal? How does this build your resume? How does this help you? And how does this help the wing move forward? Because then through these process, number one, you meet a lot of people, right? And you meet people and you're like, I didn't even know we had that job. I didn't know we had that job here. That sounds interesting. How do I go about that? And so whether it be TAP or Yellow Ribbon, or we have
a couple IG positions coming up.
IG positions. So we've got
a safety position coming up. These are all wing staff
on the books. They're not open right now, or I don't know.
They're coming.
Not projected to be open is that we've also have a DNTF manager. We have a resiliency first sergeant. All these positions that are out here as full-time staff. It just being involved with that, you can really propel your career with those positions.
Yep, absolutely. And we're being very open and honest with the hiring. We have a board. We announce it prior, and we make sure that everybody who wants to take a swing at one of these positions gets an interview. And we definitely are open with our hiring process. So, but a lot of opportunities coming up for full-time work at the fighter wing. That was August, a busy month when it comes to retirements, change of commands and stuff like that. Into September, not quite as busy, but absolutely getting the ACS package. They are deploying many of them out the door in September. Some go in October, but the majority kick out in September. So we're going to try to make sure we send them off properly. I know Colonel Yersak is going to have the schedule of events, and we'll definitely make sure I talked to the deployers in September. Mm-hmm. And that was absolutely the right thing to do. Make sure they're out the door for a combat deployment, wherever they're going with our support. And hopefully they can tell me good things, that they're prepared and ready to go. We had a fighter wing leadership lunch with the squadron commanders and the senior enlisted leaders. And that was good. We basically talked to them about the Protect Patch initiative, and we're definitely giving them the feedback we want them to press forward with and help us. Because it's not just the wing commander, wing leadership team. It's not the group commanders. It's not the squadron commanders and senior enlisted leaders. It's every senior NCO and every NCO. And Chief Parks, you talked about when you were an airman, it was the senior airmen that were enforcing.
Yeah, I showed up my first base as an A1C, and they were like, "This is your supervisor, the senior airman." And that guy pretty much owned my life. Like, it told me which bushes I needed to trim and what grass to pick out of rocks and where the trash to take out. And also told me, hey, I'm going to help you figure out your LES and all these things. And I think maybe that's a lost art. We used to have a first-time supervisor program, and maybe that's something we need to look at, is just making sure that our NCOs are ready to protect that patch.
Captain Haythorne, one of the things that she came out with unsolicited is how strong our senior NCOs are. Mm-hmm. She's an active duty captain that had just came to our unit from the 509th. And that she made that unsolicited comment, and it's so true. That development and that tier of leaders are strong, and they can help us through this stuff.
There's something about getting chiefed, if you will, right? Of someone correcting you that's a chief that maybe doesn't know you, but when it's the person that you see every day, then you feel it with a little more love and a little bit more compassion.
Yep. Awesome. We went to Moody. That was great. They had a barbecue competition, and the winners are undisclosed at this time. But absolutely, that was a great trip down there. And then I went on to Africa, and then I went on to Hogsmoke. So that was a kind of a busy week of traveling. Captain Sievers assumed command of the AMXS on Saturday, and that's awesome. Another leader that has been groomed in our wing, taken over. And he's a young squadron commander, captain, but he has some extensive background. And I think he's going to do a great job. So the leadership team is even building, and we're putting a great team together. That's basically the wrap up of the August and September UTAs. So we're going to change the format at where we try to present this. We're going to try to present this before the UTA so that airmen and supervisors and leaders can listen to this driving in on Thursday night for Friday prep, or airmen that are driving in on Friday or Saturday for the UTAs. So we're going to try to have a pre-UTA Babble Time, and then the interview attached that. Next month, we're going to interview Chief Parks. You've got a great background. I could give you an introduction now, but we'll save it for that podcast. But you're we talked about building our leadership team. You're just another piece in this incredible we're building. It is probably 345 degrees complete. We only have a couple little pieces to add in there. And then we're just going to have this incredible wheel of leadership that at this wing, which this wing deserves that. I'm real glad that you came, and we'll get your details out to the wing here next UTA. Any final words on Babble Time?
It's good to be back. 13 years gone, and to be back, I like to say home.
Yep.
This is my home. I owe a lot to the 442nd and to the members here. And it's such an honor to be able to serve. And it's a distinct honor for me to get to serve here in my home unit.
Yep.
So it's good to be back.
Hire well, because I did. This man's going to be a great command chief for our wing for the next 3 years, hopefully.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Babble Time, $175. If you can guess why it's Babble Time. Bob, final words.
As of time of recording, there's still time to get tickets to the Air Force Ball on September 14th, if you want to go to that.
I would highly encourage, like anybody, if you've not been to an Air Force Ball, it's worth it. It's a good time.
It is absolutely a good time. I'm going to be out of town.
Yes,
but I think the 509 puts it on very well.
Our guests today are two of the masterminds behind the Wing's participation in a major joint exercise in the Pacific called RIMPAC.
And this was an awesome exercise to Hawaii. Obviously, when you say the word Hawaii, everybody thinks that we're taking advantage of the location, but we actually taken advantage of the training at Hawaii. The second time I've been to Hawaii with the unit. I'm here with Nomar. He was the Projo. Nomar Geidel. He's a lieutenant colonel in the 303rd Fighter Squadron, and he was a Projo for this whole thing. Worked heavily with Chief Moylan.
Correct.
He's not here right now. We have some maintenance guys coming in to talk to their side. But Nomar, why don't you give us your background real quick? And this was not your first time Projoing, based on what you told me earlier.
Correct. Yeah. Not my first iteration as a Projo. I did do it once before on active duty as well.
Copy that.
For a trip there. But yeah, background here, been flying the A-10 since 2010. Did 12 and a half-ish years on active duty there before making the transition over the reserves.
Yep. Thank you. You got one of the new guys in the squadron, which is
here since 2020. Still relatively young as far as 442nd timelines go, for sure. But happy to be here.
Gotcha. All your active duty time was flying the A-10. Is that right?
That is correct.
That's awesome.
Yeah. First assignment was at 81st at Spangdahl. Then I was with the 74th at Moody. And then the 354th out at DM.
Got it. Bulldogs just closed down this year. Kind of a sad day. I was a Bulldog as well. My middle daughter was born a Bulldog. It's going to be a sad ceremony in Davis-Monthan here later next month.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, I assume you're going.
I am, yes.
Yep, hog smoke, getting sidetracked here. Anyways, so you mentioned that you were a Projo in the 74th.
Correct.
And it was probably one of those last, hey, the 74th is going away, so let's do a TSP to where?
We went to Europe.
Oh, what a surprise.
Yeah.
What a good choice.
Close down the 81st and then deploy back there again.
Got it. A lot of Europe time. That's still valid. Okay, so talk to me about that quickly, that other prior Projo where you did in the spoke, basically.
Yes. Yeah, it was the spoke. So we were hoving out of Estonia. Was where we first ended up in Europe there. And then probably 2 or 3 weeks before we left Moody, the squadron commander said, hey, we have a trip going to Hungary. One of our spokes here, take some jets down there and work with a bunch of NATO partners during an exercise there. Go figure it out.
Awesome.
That was about the intro I got to it. I just started blasting emails off to the couple contacts that we had with the Hungarians and the folks at USAFE. And somehow managed to figure out where we're going, what we're doing. Got to Estonia and then immediately left to go do a site visit in Hungary.
Okay.
Yeah. And
how many jets did you bring down to Hungary?
We figured, I think it was 6. 4 or 6, something like that for the start.
In my opinion, I think if you take a 6 ship, you can maintain combat operations doing rolling 2s, having 2 spares. And that's something that I think the A-10 would have been really good at. So 6 is an interesting number, in my opinion, to do a spoke. How many months or how many weeks, hopefully, from your tasking for Hungary to when you got the airplanes down to Hungary? How much planning did it take?
It was, I think we only had 5 or 6 weeks.
Okay. So it took you 5 to 6 weeks to plan that spoke, is what you're telling me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's too long. We got to be more agile than that. So awesome. So you had some experience and obviously worked with maintenance before and realized that it's really easy to get a bunch of pilots to get the airplanes down to the location and hand them over to maintenance. But the maintenance personnel and the procedures and the equipment is probably more challenging anything else.
Always presents a challenge. And the unique thing with Europe too is the dip clearances, getting aircraft across other countries' airspace.
Yeah. So obviously Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and then is it right into Hungary?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So awesome. Not quite as the same as getting them across the Pacific from California or from Arizona to Hawaii.
Yeah. The maintenance aspect always a heavy feature for sure. Yeah. If you want to employ and operate, you got to have them there to keep the planes airworthy.
And I assume you learned how complex the maintenance side is and how important that relationship is, ops and maintenance. Yeah,
absolutely.
And our unit has a relationship with maintenance. And I don't know what the Bulldogs are like at the time, or the 74th was like at the time.
74th then. Yeah, we had a pretty good relationship.
Yeah, I would say ours is benchmark, and it has been for many decades. And I think that makes some of our achievements more understandable. So that's good. You learned that. So how much prep did you have, or how long were you the Projo for the RIMPAC deployment?
For RIMPAC, that started about a year ago.
About a year ago, yes.
Almost a year in the seat as the Projo for it.
And I asked you earlier, why did you step up? Because you obviously, to succeed, you got to volunteer.
Absolutely. You got to volunteer. But the big thing was at the time, I was living in Tennessee, so I was a commuting TR. So that was my approach to
huge challenge
with the unit. It was, yeah. A lot of remote working and things like that. But
yeah, absolutely. So FedEx pilot living in Memphis.
Yes, sir.
Commuting up here to stay CMR, combat mission ready to fly, and also Projoing. Huge challenge. And I think you said that you did it because you didn't want to go dormant.
Exactly.
You wanted a challenge.
Want to contribute to the unit still and keep up what's going on.
Absolutely huge.
And not just be a random guy that shows up and sucks a few sorties and then disappears.
Yep. So. And we need those TRs too. But we also need TRs that want to contribute, and also probably led to your next job. You've been selected to be the next director of operations for the fighter squadron, which, by the way, that was one of my more best appreciated that job more than some, because I was highly involved with the operations and the fighter pilots and the execution work with maintenance. So that's a great job for you to take. And I appreciate you stepping up for both of these positions. Not doing it from Memphis anymore, though.
No, moved back here. So yeah, obviously one of the prerequisites for the DO job.
Yeah. And I understand you moved into our former wing commander's prior residence.
Yes. Yeah. That is the house that
General Schultz on the ridge line. That's actually a really nice house. I've been in it many times. Congrats on buying that house. You got some odd neighbors though.
There are a couple.
Yeah. The Yersacks across the street. Yeah. Lieutenant Colonel Yersack, our support group commander, lives on that ridge.
He does.
And so does a former vice wing commander, Jimbo McCauley. So he lives at the very end of the...
he's at the very end of the street there. So.
That's where it gets all spooky. And there's a lot of oil leaking on the pad because his cars are all junk, according to Lieutenant Colonel Marks. Anyways, yeah, awesome place to live. And did you find any skeletons in the closet with General Schultz's name on it or anything like that?
No, nothing like that. There was another family that lived there after General Schultz, but
yeah, they hassled General Schultz out the door. They wanted to move in. They bought the house. General Schultz did not. Okay, awesome. Your next job, this Projo, prepare you, in your opinion, for your next job as the director of operations.
Definitely, there's a few aspects of it that cross over.
Yeah,
obviously, the relationship you build as Projo with the maintenance team will help. When you take over the DO job, that's my job, is to integrate with Captain Haythorne and the rest of the maintenance team out there on a day-to-day basis.
Yep.
So.
And then you basically had to do that on a project basis. Yeah, those relationships will make it easier for us to execute our flying hour program and the training and make ourselves ready now and be ready for our combat deployment and stuff like that. Awesome. I talked about what are the 5 challenges, and you talked about planning with the Navy. That was one of your things. Yeah. You thought planning with the Army was hard, but planning with the Navy was even worse, it sounds like.
It had some challenges for sure, and Lauren was not at the planning conferences, but Chief Moylan and some of the other senior Hankins that were there doing the site visits and the planning conferences tested the same thing. It was very much a get everybody together, and then what do you all want to do during this exercise? So we would look at the other air players and some of the other ground players. I like to do this, I want to do that. And we had a plan, but then we still have to wait for the white cell to come down with, here's the actual schedule, here's the plan. And then we modified it.
And this was the actual exercise schedule. So you did not, at the initial planning conference, mid-planning conference, or final planning conference, actually plan the deployment, the logistics, the integration with the 924th.
A little bit. The 924th had their reps there as well. So, that was a big aspect, sharing the TDY with them.
So I did a big project last year, Patriot Fury, and I had what's funny, I talked about Captain Creech. That is the son of Lieutenant Colonel Creech, who was and he brought in the joint planning process. He had gone to the school. He had done multiple joint exercises. And it sounds like you guys did not really have that as a vector at these conferences. And it was very efficient, very logical. And we had updates to the JTF commander and stuff like that. And you guys kind of didn't have that?
There was that at some levels. Third Fleet for the Navy is who was organizing the exercise. And of course, they're working with 28 other nations as well that were involved. So there was elements of the joint planning process, I think at that level, that they were using to coordinate everything. When it came down to the air working group and integrating with the surface working group and things like that, it was a little bit more of a free-for-all.
Okay.
At least that's the way it was perceived on our end with the planning process. Because like I said, we get there and we do our intros and everything at the planning conference, and the white cell forces running the air working group just said, all right, guys, integrate together, plan.
Yeah.
So there wasn't, here's the plan for the exercise. Here's our objectives. There wasn't in that first row base off of.
So. Yeah, it sounds like a huge challenge.
It was.
And this was you stated in our XSUM, which is our initial 24-hour report, that this is the biggest naval exercise of the year.
Yes, sir.
I think in general, and it's 25,000 participants.
There were, yes, for this year's iteration of RIMPAC, there were a little over 25,000 personnel involved, like at 29 nations, counting the United States. We had 150 plus aircraft, 40 surface ships, and 3 submarines.
Yeah, crazy. Just huge exercise that we jumped into. So maybe even if they had this most organized planning process, it was overwhelming. So
when you get to that sort of level, theater level type planning and integration, it takes a lot for sure. So.
Gotcha. So planning, where were the planning conferences? Did you have an initial, a mid, and a final?
There was initial, mid, and final. I did not make it to the initial planning
conference. What a surprise. You get assigned a year prior and you already missed the initial. That's hysterical.
So Stain, Major Grenell, to the initial planning conference, as I was unavailable by the time I found out about it.
Gotcha.
And that was in San Diego at Point Loma Naval Annex. And then the mid-planning conference was in Hawaii.
Okay.
So we also combined our site survey with that.
Gotcha.
Had the team out there, started looking at hotels, looking at Kaneohe Bay and possible ops locations. They thought we were going to park at K Bay, but they weren't sure. So we didn't get that final answer until after the final planning conference.
No kidding.
Yeah, no kidding. So
yeah, K Bay is a score. Live in Honolulu, opposite traffic to K Bay. That's where you want to operate out of. But yeah, site survey, you said that's super important.
Absolutely.
For any budding projo out there, that you got to get eyes on the ground of where you're going to go. And when it comes to deployable combat wings in the future, when we're given an area of responsibility, it's probably smart to potential locations, get a site survey, or hopefully there's some type of report that you can plan to in regards to that. So these things that we're doing for training are not just going TDY in Hawaii. There's factors that apply to our combat mission and potentially in the future.
Yeah, it's easy for us to say, that ramp's big enough for some jets.
Yep.
We can work out of that building, and Lauren can attest to all the other stuff that goes on the maintenance side when we start looking at.
Yeah, I imagine
are they going to change an engine if we blow an exit or something like that? Do we have hangar space?
Captain Haythorne, you went on some of the site surveys, or you just...
No.
You did not? Okay, but you went on the TDY, correct?
I went on the TDY. So
okay.
Coming over here so recently, being part of the active duty crew and replacing Captain Simpson, who left this spring, I came to the unit and they said, do you want to go to Hawaii? And I said, absolutely. I want to go to Hawaii. When are we leaving? And they said, in a month and a half.
Perfect.
So all of the planning from a maintenance point of view, anything that we could have planned for, because there were a lot of unknowns, even when we were headed out the door, had already been taken care of.
Good.
This fantastic senior NCOs that we have, phenomenal human beings that really dug into the intricacies of it, specifically Chief Moylan and Senior Hankins that Nomar already mentioned. They did a fantastic job looking ahead, looking forward to see what might be an issue and trying to fix it before it became a real problem.
Yeah, I just had a Wing Commander Conference, Air Force Reserve Command sponsored, and they talked about developing NCOs and senior NCOs, which obviously is super important. But to be honest, when they say that to me, I go, wow, I really, because we have such a huge head start when it comes to our talent and our expertise and our experience when our NCOs. And I'm glad you mentioned that. And maybe that was something I hope that was your first thing you noticed when you came over from the active duty, is how incredible our NCOs are and senior NCOs. So you're given basically a perfect package to go to Hawaii with.
So it's perfect.
Yeah. You know, it wasn't perfect, but you just flexible and you change it and you make decisions. You got to point the ship we'll say ship since it's RIMPAC, in the right direction, but you need to make adjustments as required. Hopefully you don't have to 180. Anyways, K-Bay was a challenge. Marine Corps base, I've been there in the past. It's a little bit different than an Air Force base. It's very small, if I recall. But you told me you did not run into Marine Captain Creech.
I did not.
Yeah, so he's the son of that chief planner I talked about who brought the joint planning process. I bet you if you ran into him, that would have been K-Bay smooth. But he was texting me on the first day that I guess did you have an issue getting from K-Bay to Honolulu on the first day? Guess not. He must have been lying to me.
No,
so he said I could have coordinated buses and stuff like that. I said, we don't take buses. We do rental cars.
Yeah.
We had some issues with our people landing at a time that was not intended, and so we're shuffling people with rental cars.
We adjusted the boat to make it happen. Yeah, he mentioned that. That's interesting. Anyways, but K-Bay, what challenges did you guys perceive there once you got there?
Biggest one was not knowing our exact parking and ops location until quite last minute in the exercise.
Okay. Were there other airplanes running out of K-Bay?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
The 15th MEU showed up and had some CH-53s there. There were the MH-60s that were already stationed there operating out, and some MV-22s, and then additional P1s, P3s, P8s.
Wow. So there's way more aircraft than there were there.
AC-130, MQ-9. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to show.
So K-Bay was not the 442nd secret for this exercise. Yeah, because everybody tries to go to Hickam and we jump into K-Bay. Okay, so
Hickam was pretty full as well, with a lot of more P3s, P8s, tankers, and they have their own assets there as well. It was not conducive to fighter operations for sure.
Gotcha. And it's a lot different. It's busy. And probably more restrictive as an Air Force base versus a Marine Corps base, I bet. But I don't know. That's my.
There were some challenges having Honolulu International integrated out there as well.
Yep.
As far as getting back to the question with Kaneohe Bay, I know fuel was a known issue before we even showed up. Lauren could talk to some of those.
Yeah, why don't you talk to we talked about parking. We said, hey, pilots just need a place to park, and then they go to the dorms or wherever. What about when it comes to the challenges that the maintenance side had in regards to operating out of K-Bay?
Absolutely. I think the fuel ended up being the biggest point of frustration, but a lot of it was that communication is the most difficult thing we do. And the Air Force and the Marines call things by different names. We'll be talking about the same thing, but we think we're talking about completely different things. And so we'll end up at a spot where we think we've agreed on a desirable COA for both parties. And then we'll end up doing something else. And so we're frustrated, but then the Marines think that they've done exactly what we asked them to do.
You just want some Jet A.
The difference in a hot pit versus a FARP.
Oh, yeah.
And what their definition of that is versus what we thought it was. And so we ended up talking past each other a lot of times where we think we're effectively communicating, but we weren't, just because we don't call things by the same name.
Okay, so if any Marines are listening, what's the difference between a hot pit and a FARP?
Man, FARPing, the line ended up being drawn between whether or not our personnel needed to be involved in it. If we're going to call it a hot pit, we have tech data that tells us exactly how we execute that. FARP, not so much. We know we can do it. It's within the realm of the possible, but it's not necessarily within the realm of our standard operations or our tech data.
Yeah.
So when we involve our people, we have to follow our tech data. If a plane lands somewhere else and TA or the Marines or whoever catches our jets, receives our jets, and fuels them, they follow their tech data to the standard that is required for an A-10. If we're there, our rules might be slightly different. And so when you try to put all of those people in the same space and refuel a plane at the same time, especially when we had very limited manpower and we didn't have bodies to spare, they're asking us to send them people. We're saying we can't. And they'll say, we can't refuel the plane without your people here. And so we would say, okay, fine, then just send them back over here. Now we need a truck. And so it was like a domino effect of things happening repeatedly where communication really was the most difficult thing.
I think FARP, if you use the term FARP, everybody thinks of it differently. I noticed that it's just been when we've increased our use of specialized refueling operations. That's really what we're doing. When I say, hey, go FARP to a pilot, it's a verb and they go FARP. If I say, hey, FARP to an Army guy, it's a location. If I say it to A4, it's a regulation. And it has all these requirements to execute FARP operations. It's specialized refueling. Hey, I need gas. And that's where, as a force, it's obviously one of the essential parts of turning an airplane, and we're just going to have to think through it. That's interesting that you ran into that too, because it's a noun, it's a verb, it's a location. It's a hard word to communicate inter-service. So that's interesting that you ran into it as well. But yeah, specialized refueling operations, where? Over there. How are you going to do it? With a truck, with a fountain? Is it a hot pit? Yes. Then we'll come and do our TO. Anyways, good stuff. So K-Bay, the challenge, communication with the Marines, that makes a lot of sense. Anything else about K-Bay? Cool place.
It is, yes. It's a nice base there. Nice part of the island and everything. Yeah. It was.
Did we have any weather issues? Because I know that it had limited instrument approach issues.
Yep. It was limited approaches, shorter runway.
Yep.
You can talk to the Navy about the P8 they put into the water.
No, we're not excited about that. Was this still in the water, by the way?
No, they had removed that just before
the big 25,000. Yeah. Okay.
But there was not a day where we had bad weather all day or anything else like that.
But up and down, basically.
Due to the nature of the tropics and the terrain of the islands, we would get rain showers that pop up all of a sudden that weren't on the forecast whenever. And
it's not unlimited locations to divert to there, obviously.
Correct.
So as a pilot, that was something that obviously I was always tracking. What else, Captain Haythorne, about K-Bay? Anything else other than the fuel that was a standout?
From a security standpoint, just getting access to our buildings.
Okay.
And as Nomar already mentioned, just like the parking space, that was frustrating when we're sharing a ramp with a variety of other maintainers and you've got a bunch of maintainers standing out on the ramp. There's no planes there yet. And everybody's just looking at each other. You're not with us. Where are you parking? How many airplanes are you bringing? And what kind? But also just from a security standpoint, they just handle things differently than we do. They're very methodical in their processes. Some things that the Air Force, I think, is better at innovating and cutting through a lot of that red tape.
Yeah.
From a security standpoint, things that don't add to security and are unnecessary. We just don't do them. And we just take care of our business and secure our space. But they are very picky about the way that they go about that. It was interesting. We worked through it. Communication, again, was the hardest part. But yeah, I would say that was it from a...
Awesome. And we brought our own security forces, correct?
We did, yes. We had to bring them to watch any of the weapons we brought along to the storage area.
Okay.
Because they had a temp storage area set up for some of the stuff that the various...
Was that on the other side of the runway?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. And did we have to run 24-hour shifts of our own security forces?
No, it was not our own forces working 24 hours. Anyone that had munitions out there, supply, a 2-man crew minimum.
Got it.
They rotated shifts. We also had security forces keeping an eye on the aircraft on the ramp in addition to the Marines.
Got it.
It's unique. They have a road that crosses the runway there, so there's traffic.
Yeah, I remember that. And I remember being in a kayak like 100 feet from the airplanes. And then the boat patrol rolled up on me and wondered what I was. I had to pull my ID out and tell them, hey, I know these airplanes. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, definitely a security issue there as well.
All right. I think one of the other challenges we talked to was our arm, D-arm.
Yeah.
Taking off out there. It was very non-standard, stemming probably from some of the Marine Corps not understanding the gun system and things like that.
A lot more communication piece on that, where we were allowed to arm and de-arm. Because I think there was a lot of back and forth when we first got there. We had communicated what we wanted to do beforehand, and we had a plan for exactly how we wanted to do it. I think we were going to do everything. I forget how it started, but I think we were going to do it all at the Kayla. And
which is that?
That's the live load.
The live load. So it's that ramp at the end of that one runway near the bay, basically.
Mm-hmm. And then it ended up swapping back and forth. And I said, you can't be there for that length of time. We've got all these other airplanes going through at the same time. You can't.
Yeah.
That's a time constraint. So we're going to have to move you where else is safe to do it. We're not going to be we can't just do this anywhere. So then we're going back to the drawing board and trying to figure out where we're going to do each of these pieces that are unique to.
Did you just end up doing it at the Kayla eventually?
No, we had a plan to do what we call normal EOR checks in the hammerhead on both ends of the runway. However, the southern side, they changed the plan on us last minute when we showed up. We could only arm the aircraft when they were on the runway.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which increases the time they had the gates down for the road and a bunch of other issues that they have. So it slowed things down on the airfield a little bit, at least from our
on the runway. Yeah, but that doesn't that's not very agile. So, okay, good. All right, awesome. We did some unique things there in regards to the quick sync. And one of the things, we'll get to the detail. Let's go right to the quick sync now. You said that was one of your biggest challenges. Why don't we talk about what quick sync is and how much time we had to turn the corner on that?
Yeah, quick sync is a new use for a GBU 31 JDAM, a GPS guided bomb. So they're using it to target ships specifically.
Yep.
This is an item that Air Force Research Labs is looking into and US Stratcom, and it's something that came across our purview at the final planning conference.
So how many months from actually departure did you know that they asked you to do this?
It was 3 months from final planning conference to when we left.
So we left basically end of June, right? And when was the final planning conference?
Final planning conference was in March.
Yeah, end of March.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. So April, May, and June to sort this out.
Yes, sir.
So a big ask because this is basically a new weapon for the A-10, more or less. It is a GBU 31, which is a 2,000 pound bomb body, but some of the components on it were different.
Correct.
And obviously focused on sinking boats.
Correct.
The quick sink, there's videos out there, just Google it. Pretty impressive video out there that you can read. And, that was obviously probably a boat made out of tin and one bomb took that thing down. It was obviously more of a challenge than that.
That video, I think, is like a 200-foot fishing trawler of some sort or something like that. But the targets we were going against, one was the USS Dubuque, or ex-USS Dubuque, as the Navy calls it.
It's the ex,
commissioned,
because you don't want to sink a commissioned boat.
And then the Tarawa Dubuque was just shy of 600 feet long.
Huge boat.
And about 100 feet wide. Yes, sir.
Huge boat. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And obviously, let's talk about the planning and the logistics first, and then we'll talk about the tactics. Boom. 3 months prior, they say, hey, we want you to do that.
At the final planning conference, I was sitting there along with Major Lanphier Rehab, and this was in the air working group, and someone else introduced themselves, so-and-so, for Whiteman Air Force Base. And he and I looked at each other, what's from Whiteman is here?
Yeah, I don't recognize you.
That's not a name I know, and it's not a person I recognize. So we struck up the conversation. It was one of the engineers from the 72nd Test Squadron.
Right across the street from the fighter squadron. Isn't that crazy? No idea who this dude was. And he works 200 meters from your parking spot.
So we started the conversation and found out that the B-2 was participating, doing quick sync.
Yep.
And then that evolved into a conversation between us, the B-2 engineer, the AFRL representative, things like that. They asked us to be a backup platform for the B-2.
Yeah, I think
that was the original request. Say, hey, you guys can carry 31s. We're like, absolutely. Can you guys support us in this test? So yeah, let's go with that option. So awesome. The conversation started.
You could have said no.
We could have.
Yeah, thanks for not, because it was a challenge, and
it was.
It's we'll say a feather in our cap, absolutely, for making this happen. Okay, so thanks for saying yes, and go say thanks to that dude that's 200 meters from your parking spot.
So that's where it started, and then it evolved into us being additional test points. AFRL said, hey, we'll give you some components. We had to source the bomb bodies. Maintenance had a ton of work to do, especially on the MUNS side, as far as getting approval to build the weapon, to load the weapon, because it had never been loaded on an A-10 before. We ended up loading it via integrated combat turn.
Yep.
There's a whole ton of stuff that went in.
That it went into this thing. So yeah, so we had to get the bomb bodies. That was actually probably easy because they had them here, right? Then we tried to score the fuses. I think we didn't get the initial fuse that we were asking for. So we just used 152s, if that.
We did use 152s.
Okay. Which is just a type of fuse. And then we had to get that special nose device that came from AFRL?
Those came from AFRL.
Okay. And I remember talking and it was like, hey, how are we going to get these all to Hawaii? And I think the smart thing was, hey, get them here so that we could have our hands on them. They all came here. And I actually saw them on the first C-17 that left. And it was pretty neat. And I told the passengers, hey, guys, come look at the bombs you're flying with. They had no idea. And by the way, these are rounds as well. Have a safe flight. But yeah, I think we had 8 bombs.
4.
4? Okay.
I guess had some inert heavyweights.
Maybe I miscounted. But 4 bombs on the C-17 and all the rounds and then the nose plugs and the fuses. So put that together and got that here. But I think the harder part was getting permissions to build, permissions to carry or load, and permissions to obviously employ this weapon since it is different than what our authorized TOs allow. Were you guys involved in that, or did you let the experts run with that?
From a maintenance standpoint, Chief Moylan, being the Projo, but also just being the SME, took care of a lot of it.
Yeah, so he's the main loader. So obviously in charge of the guy. So
Absolutely.
Him being the Projo, that obviously helped. But I'm sure the dump had to get some permissions as well.
Absolutely. For as similar as this thing was to things that we load all the time, it's still a tremendous amount of work to be able to, even one little change to the buildup, we still can't. We know how to do it in theory, but we can't do anything that we don't have the tech to
Absolutely.
do. So then they're having to go back and rewrite all of this stuff before we're even allowed to touch it. And knowing that we only first found out about this being an opportunity just a few short months before we left, we were weeks out, even days out by the time we were figuring out last minute items before we hit the road to go to Hawaii.
I think the airplanes were off the base before we got the Sea Eagle permission to employ, or to carry and employ, which is Sea Eagle is, I would call it, what's the best way? It's the final approval to carry and drop. And typically it's done by a live test where they, in a controlled environment, drop the bomb and say, yep, it didn't come up and hit the tail or whatever bombs could do wrong. And I think it was like a week or 2 weeks prior. Crazy.
I don't remember the exact timeline, but yeah, it was pretty close to us departing. We finally got the signed memo by the...
You're disagreeing with hey, the airplanes were already gone. That would have been, I know, it came in late. So,
but yeah, finally, Stratcom 2-star, I don't remember the name, signed it. So you guys...
And it wasn't a blanket authorization. This weapon was authorized only for us.
Correct.
The one-time thing.
A one-time event for us here at the wing. And like you said, it's typically done by test, whether it's 422, ATC, any of the other test elements out there.
Yep.
However, due to the timelines and some of the experience levels that we already have in the squadron with prior test guys still here and things like that, it got pushed.
Yeah, luckily our experience made it
an opportunity as well, drove us getting this put together.
Absolutely. So obviously the parts are at K-Bay. Where did we build up the bombs?
Gosh, I don't even know. Honestly.
You could say in Hawaii.
In Hawaii.
In Hawaii.
At K-Bay.
There you go.
They were. That's
okay.
Finally built for sure.
And did they get like temporary tech data or what did they have that authorized them to build?
I'm not sure of the name of the actual entity, but yes, the people that issue our tech orders had to go back in and make it make sense.
Okay.
Make it's not that different.
Yeah,
than
152 and a bomb
like.
body, and the tail kit is standard.
Yes.
And the nose plug is new.
They basically just had to validate that none of the new items would hinder any of our normal building or loading operations.
Yep.
And validate that it wouldn't be in any way unsafe to do it the normal way.
But we can't keep it easy, right? We couldn't just build these bombs and load them normally. We had to do them during what?
During an ICT.
ICT, integrated combat turn. These airplanes flew in the morning, I assume, landed, the pilots kept the engines running.
We did rapid crew swaps.
So we shut the engines down, swapped out the pilots to the chosen ones that were authorized to drop these weapons. And then we loaded the bombs. And how quick did it take to load those bombs?
It was maybe 10 minutes per aircraft, 15 minutes. Once we were parked there in the Kayla. So it wasn't long for a single bomb on the aircraft there by any means, but definitely unique. We're in their live load area, non-standard ops for us. But the maintenance team were rock stars out there, and everything thankfully went off without a hitch.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, all this whole thing, the timeline and the challenges and working through so many different agencies and barriers in a training environment at a non-familiar, non-local, non-Air Force field, just the little steps that we're not even talking about to make this successful is huge. And it's a huge thing. And I talked to Weapons Officer Charlie Phelps, Major Phelps, Halo, and just the math that he did to make the tactics work, made them up, innovation again, and just using experience and innovation to make something up that would be effective. And I think AFRL was phenomenally happy with our results.
Absolutely. Yeah. Halo's work in the prep, while he's also coordinating with test and StratCom and all this other stuff, trying to help our maintenance team get everything improved. Yeah, he put in a lot of work to thinking about how are we going to make these effective employments. And yes, we had 4 bombs go where they were supposed to go and do what they were supposed to do. And AFRL was extremely happy with the test results.
Yeah, the first delivery was a system delivery, basically passing the coordinates over data link. That's phenomenal.
Data link.
Because the weather was crappy. And
data link in general was a huge win for us out there, being fully integrated.
Yep, awesome. And General Healy, the commander of Air Force Reserve Command, noted this during one of our readiness briefings where you did I was actually the Cub, where you briefed up this exercise. And I was he said, hey, I have a meeting with the CSAF, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, in 30 minutes. I need bullets on quick SIGs. I run in my office, calling you, basically 12 bullets of the big thing, not gun bullets. 5 statements, 12 data points that showed how awesome this was. And he took that, our commander of Air Force Reserve Command, and bragged it to the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. So that's what our command thinks about what we did. And I like to say, hey, any given day, we could do something exceptional, because we do. But this was kind of plus. So awesome job on quick SIG. And great results. AFRL was, which is Air Force Research and Logistics. I don't even know what AFR.
Air Force Research Laboratory.
Okay, good. I knew the first 2, Air Force. They were super happy with the results. And we employed on both of those decommissioned boats.
We employed all 4 of our quick sinks on the Dubuque. That was, as I said, it evolved into us doing the additional test points for AFRL. And then we were also there for the B2 employment the next week.
Yep. I think we provided, basically we fact for them. Forward Air Control provided them coordinates.
That was our plan. We were one of their dynamic targeting options.
They knew they had a task and they took off out of Whiteman Air Force Base, but the boat moved en route. So we provided them updated coordinates for their system. So that's awesome. So we're affecting the fight from HawG to B2. So phenomenal here at Whiteman Standard. Awesome stuff. Let's see here. Let's talk about some of the other wins. You said the exposure to other agencies. I already talked about that, is specifically the Marine Corps. What about any other agencies? We did some international stuff and such.
Yeah, there was some international integration for sure during the maritime events that we worked out there. We worked with ships, various participating nations. I know just myself on a couple of stories, I talked with Italian ship, and I believe it was Chile,
yeah.
But they're typically as they divided the surface ships up, it was usually a U.S. surface ship with 2 to 4 international ships out there in their action groups and doing different training events and things like that. So
yeah, that's interesting, because I know China is trying to get into South America. In Chile was one of those countries, and Hawaii's right in the middle. So that's a super strategic state. And this exercise probably emphasized that competition.
Getting to work with different nations, trying to do some coordination and planning with them while they're at sea has its own challenges.
Wow. Yeah.
Add on the language
barriers. Yeah.
Stuff like that.
So I saw an article today. Hey, do we need a linguist on these? I think it was like a deployable combat wing. The answer is hell yeah. Not everybody speaks English, fellas and ladies. We need to understand that we have to communicate with not just maybe the person who speaks English, but maybe contractors or people on the base. You never know what assets you're going to use at these unfamiliar ACE locations. Therefore, linguists a huge thing.
Did you guys run into any of that with all the other airframes on the base and trying to coordinate things or anything like that, Lauren?
Not nearly as much as you guys did. Honestly, the primary conversations that were had were crosstalk between us and the Marines.
Yeah.
Or the Navy. There were a couple of entities on base that were specifically with the refueling stuff that was some were Navy, some were Marines. But that was pretty much the
He talked about communication being a challenge between services. Imagine it being between countries that are not military that speak a different language. That's something that's a reality. We're not going to OSAN only. That we need to prep ourselves as a DoD to be able to operate out of anywhere. So that's a huge thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Before the ships left harbor, they did a unique thing there. It's essentially open ship days.
Cool.
The nations get to choose if they want to participate or not, but there was, I forget how many, I think it was 18 or 20 or something like that.
Did any of our guys get to hop on the boats?
Yes, sir.
No kidding.
Yes,
That's
sir.
great.
Yeah, a bunch of us, I know on the pilot side, there were quite a few of us out there. I don't know how many maintainers got out and actually.
She's looking like she didn't know about it. So maybe there's some lack of communication with the ops and maintenance on that one. Hey, thanks, guys.
But when they were in Pearl Harbor.
Air Force appreciation, I'm sure, though.
They hadn't. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You look at some of the living conditions stuff. You're like,
I remember I had an exchange when I was a young A-10 pilot in 97 with a carrier. And I went into the officer bunks, the pilot's bunks, and I said, what, do 3 people live here? As a courtesy, thinking that there was only 2 or something like that. And he goes, no, 8. And there was 8 bunks in that room. It was horrible. Yeah. Good to be in the Air Force. Awesome. So let's talk about our integration with the 924th Fighter Group. That's an awesome unit. We know many people because they came out of Barksdale. The 47th did, and they're aligned with the 944th Fighter Wing out of Luke, which Colonel Riddle is a former pilot of our wing, is the commander. Integrating with them was probably an awesome thing to do.
Yeah, it's always good to work with other folks in the A-10 for sure and expand those relationships.
Yep.
I knew a lot of the guys in the 47th from my time at DN and previous cars as well, so it made things easy. Their Pro Joe, Regent McCoy, Skippy, and I were in the 74th together.
Okay, awesome.
Years ago.
Relationships matter.
Right. Absolutely. But yeah, we worked out an agreement, split the TDY, each going out there for a couple of weeks, shared aircraft, shared tools. This 47 doesn't go TDY like we do.
Yep.
They have some.
Actually, they do.
They're starting.
Yeah.
They have with some direction.
They like to go to Hawaii.
Yes, they do. Yeah. Yes, they do. But
I'll tell you right now, they took the jets down to Patriot Fury. They brought their airplanes and their maintenance down to Peru. So I know their maintenance real well. Joe and Chuck are the guys that I worked with. I don't know but they were phenomenal NCOs as well. And I don't know how your experience was working with them and the handoff and such.
Yeah, I think there were some challenges receiving the aircraft when you're awaiting the arrival of a bunch of aircraft and the majority of them are not yours. So it's an unfamiliar thing to be walking into. But I know that the team, the Whiteman team and the DM team were both in contact with each other moving forward into the movement to say, what are you sending us? Any known problems, anything that we need to be looking out for, anything specific that we need to bring. And so communication was really good between the teams, I would say. DM was great to work with. Some difficulties with working with unfamiliar aircraft. That's just the way it is. They have
personalities.
They have personalities that we're not familiar with. And I'm sure it was the same when they took over from us, that they had to adjust to maintaining some of the Whiteman jets that were out there. So that presented some challenges, but at the end of the day, an A-10's an A-10, and we made it work.
Yep. And that unit is divesting and closing down in about a year. They're probably struggling for manning. And that's a huge challenge. And I empathize with that unit 100% because they're full up hog-esque professionals. And I've been trying to recruit them to come up here because we want to retain them.
I had a few conversations with those guys over the playing college stuff. Like,
bring it.
Got some openings.
Yeah. I mean, bring it. We don't have our future identified yet, but obviously that's something that I work daily. But yeah, they're a great thing. And I respect that unit because of what they did for us in Patriot Fury in Peru. And I got to know them real well. And I'll tell you what, I remember walking out on the flight line and talking to the maintenance pros, and they're always smiling. They're always fired up. But that's awesome that we integrated with them and proud of that. Let's talk about the only failure we had there, which was the engine failure. Can you talk about what happened to the pilot perspective? And then you can, Captain Haythorne, talk about the maintenance side.
Absolutely. Yeah, we did have our pilots experienced a engine failure while they were over to the Big Island, doing some cast training with JTACs out there at PTA range.
Which is about 5,000 feet, if I recall. That range.
The elevation for the targets there up on the mountain is 5,000 or 6,000 feet MSL.
And it's all volcano. It's black.
Yeah,
it's real hard to play up there.
It's tough because the quality of the targets out there,
they're all black too.
They decay rapidly with the salt air and everything and getting hit. But yes, target ID can be a challenge for sure.
And then you get the tropical weather. I remember clouds and black targets. It was a big pain in the butt.
It can be very difficult. But they were on range there doing some cast training. I believe they were working with some of the JTACs for the SEAL teams at the time. But anyways, Colonel Sausage rolls in to do a straight pass, fires, and starts to do a safe escape off target and realizes that one of his engines is no longer operating as it should.
Yeah. Compressor stall?
Yes. Compressor stall, temperature spiked, and core speed dropped.
Yep.
Like that. He recognized it.
Did his procedures.
Did all the appropriate procedures and everything else like that. And then started the coordination to figure out what he's going to do with the aircraft after that. It ended up diverting into Kona International Airport, which is right underneath the airspace there for the range. That was
probably too close with all the procedures you got to do.
Yes, he's literally orbiting above the airfield that he diverted into.
Yeah.
So in that respect, it worked out well. He didn't travel far, but he ran through his options as far as, travel the 150, 200 miles back across the water, back to Kenya, or
I would not have been happy with that. Yeah. The answer to that is no. So Sausage is our chief of safety, so he knew the answer was no.
Yeah, he's this doesn't make sense. No. A good runway right here.
Absolutely.
I would have put it down and we'll figure it out. So
that was the easy part, is finding the airport right below him and landing at the international airport. So
yeah, the ground crews on range were super helpful for him. They had a couple FAT guys that were out there with the JTACs.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so they started pulling weather data, all sorts of stuff, and feed into the flight.
Yep.
They are also the ones that called us back at ops and let us know what was going on with the aircraft at the time, because we did not have radio comms with them while they're at the range. It's just too far in the terrain and everything else like that. So they called us and said, Hog 22's got an emergency going on.
It's going to Kona.
He's going to Kona.
Yeah.
Good luck. At that point. So that was a bit of a shock. I was standing in ops that day at the desk, and they actually ended up calling me. So I stepped outside to take a call, and turned around and said, "Hey, we got an issue." I think Vago, Colonel Helker was our top three at the time. So got running the ball, started to coordinate things. And after that, it was maintenance.
Maintenance challenge. Hey, we put an airplane with a bad engine at Kona International. You can't drive there. How do you solve this? So what did we end up doing?
Absolutely. Obviously, very strange, surprising situation. I don't remember who called or texted me and said, "Come upstairs now."
That sounds like Vago.
I admit it probably was. And so we run upstairs. The sky's falling. What's going on? Yeah, we've got an airplane that's not coming back. We need you to go get it, go fix it. So we start. And thankfully, this was early enough in the day that we weren't even at shift change yet. So we were at this point where we're like, we've got this crew who's our best people, like our most knowledgeable people that we trust to go over there and run this thing through its paces and figure out what the heck is going on.
So you put together an MRT, basically?
Put together a small MRT.
Yep, which is a maintenance reaction team.
Maintenance recovery
team.
So our next piece is not only how are we going to get people over there, but how are we going to get equipment over there? Because where the aircraft was parked, they wanted us to move it. So then we're going to have to tow it. And I don't know about you, I've never tried checking an aircraft tow bar on a commercial airline, but I would imagine that would probably be pretty difficult.
That's a big, heavy bar.
So we were trying to avoid that piece of it. So
plus you'd have to move it to Honolulu. I mean, it would have been a disaster to go commercial.
Tremendous amount of work from our friends in ops who started making phone calls immediately to their friends on all these other airframes that can actually carry large pieces of equipment for us. And hey, are you going in that direction this afternoon? Because we've got 3 dudes and some boxes and a tow bar and a ladder that need to go to the big island. Do you have space for us?
Yeah,
and
did Sausage pull up to the United gate out of habit and shut down there? Because he's a United pilot. So.
No, he parked in front of the FBO there.
Okay.
Thankfully, but
yes.
Yeah, he had parked in what I'm sure he thought was a perfectly fine spot, but for some reason they had issue with where he had parked.
VIP spots.
It may have had something to do with the gun. I don't know. But anyway, we had to tow it, and then we had to run it, do all of the things.
So you jumped way ahead. Oh, but
we ended up, we're making our list of things that we have to take because no one obviously was expecting anything like this. So now we're trying to make sure that we don't miss anything while still taking the lightest footprint possible, because we're asking someone for a ride on their aircraft and trying to not take up too much space. So we packed as much as we thought we needed and no more in a few boxes, and took a ladder and a tow bar and loaded it up on a C-130.
Marine Corps C-130.
Stationed from Quebec?
It was.
Okay.
Yes. And they were super, super helpful, super generous. Said, load it up.
Bring it.
Take what you need. And they took us over to the big island. And we had those 3 individuals.
Just a 3-person MRT.
We had Chief Moylan went.
Okay.
From a leadership
I was going to say, he's
view.
not an engine guy.
No, but from a weapons experience and a gun, if there were any gun issues, which there thankfully were not. And just to have a member of the leadership team on board, we're literally going to a different island. Yeah. So that was probably a safe bet. And then one of our crew chiefs that's been around forever, super knowledgeable.
Who?
It was Sergeant Jewell.
Okay. Yep. Brandon.
And then we also sent one of our engine troops. So that was our crew. Our crew of 3. They hopped on the plane with the equipment, took off. And we said, okay, call us when you get there. Let us know what's going on. So they ran that thing up. They downloaded all the data that they needed to do. And they showed us all of, it went way over my head. I'm not an engine troop or a crew chief, or I'm not a SME, but they showed us all of the data that they looked at, and they ran it through its paces, and they could not find anything wrong with that engine.
Sausage broke it, basically.
We still have no idea, and the issue has not come back.
Okay.
We still have no clue what the heck happened to that engine.
But it did compressor stall. Sausage didn't spend two extra days. Okay. I'm joking.
Something happened. We just absolutely could not figure it out.
Okay. That's good news, because if it was a fried motor, you were going to have to get a motor there.
That became the next issue, because we had just R-squared a motor. Yep. The only, you would think, just a couple week TDY, you're not even going to need one motor, hopefully. We had already needed to change one motor, and now we've got another supposed bad one. And so we're calling DM and saying, hey, you guys are about to come out here. Do you have an engine packed? You should probably pack
another
2.
Okay.
Because we're going to eat up one of them, most likely. We were convinced that we were going to find something wrong with the word that we had gotten back. It only makes sense that we would find something wrong with it. But surprisingly, we didn't find anything wrong.
And I'm sure you're bore scoping it, downloading the data,
absolutely,
doing a full check of that
doing every possible thing in the book that we could possibly look at.
That GE baby is an awesome motor, and it's kept this airplane chugging. People complain about that motor. I do not.
Motors are dependable.
They are dependable, and it's an awesome motor. And our engine shop is awesome too.
Absolutely.
So I'm sure they looked and couldn't find anything. So
they ran it for, probably hours, and called us back, and they said, you're not going to believe this. Yeah. You are absolutely not going to believe us, but we cannot find anything. And so we talked it over. We said, if there's absolutely nothing wrong with it and we cannot find anything, then we've got to bring it back. Yeah. So we called, I don't know whoever
Did you have to get like an engineering approval? I think it's 107. Is that the term?
That would be a 107, but no, we did not. No,
just
as long as it checks good by all of our troubleshooting trees and all of the tech data that we have.
It's good to go.
We don't have any unknowns.
So it wasn't a one-time flight. It was a signed off.
It was a signed off.
Good motor.
We need somebody out here to fly this plane back.
You can compressor stall a motor without it being a damaged piece of equipment. It just, when it overtemps, there's some things that could go wrong. We got lucky on that.
Absolutely.
So basically the best course of action to get this thing fixed and signed off. I didn't have to do a thing other than check it, run it, pound on it a little bit, and get it home. So awesome. How many days were the 3 amigos in Kona?
Less than a day.
Oh, bummer. I thought they were going to give them that.
Yeah, we had them pack a bag. We thought they might have to stay the night because we thought they were going to find something. And
Sausage just stayed in the FBO and came out and flew the airplane home?
No. So that was another win as well while we were there. It took a little while to figure out the KC-130's would be able to help us out. But they did get, I think it was the next morning they got on board and went. Is that correct?
I think so.
The day of the issue, though, our initial plan was to use the CH-53s that were working out of the same hangar we were. They happened to have a burn getting ready to launch when the maintenance team was getting our MRT together. And they were going to initially transfer our personnel out there. And then as we started getting down that timeline a little bit, that one didn't work out in our favor. So we used the 130. However, the CH-53 landed at Kona because they were already picking up other personnel.
Sausage got on.
And Sausage just, hey, I need a ride back. Can you guys help me out? And we're, hey, yeah, get on board.
So who do we send out to fly the airplane back?
Colonel Brown.
Colonel Brown. Okay.
Yep,
Squadron commander when I volunteered.
He volunteered to go get that and bring it back.
Good. And that motor's still in that jet today, correct?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. 136, is that the jet? That rings a
I
bell.
don't remember which one it was.
No, I don't remember.
I'm sure I'm just making that up.
It was a Whiteman jet. So.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So that was a good win. And again, problem solving. And you can see so many of the iterations of all these problems we solve, whether it's the quick sync problem set, whether it's the engine failure problem set, whether it's muscling through the planning process. That's basically what our life is in the Air Force, is solving problems, and just the experience that our unit has and the things that we do every day that people take for granted get us in that mode that we can solve problems. And the relationships that we talked about and we have are our money. And you're a young captain on active duty, but you're building relationships, and collect a book of professionals because you might need those relationships in the future. And you see how important those things are. Yeah, RIMPAC, awesome job. It was Chief Moylan, didn't take the day off, so I could thank him personally. But one of our senior NCOs that just crushes it. And huge props to him and to you, Nomar, and to the whole team that put this together. It's just another TDY for us, but we are participating in the biggest naval exercise, dropping a weapon that's never come off the airplane, fixing a jet that had an engine failure in less than a day. And that's just our standard way of business. Any final comments before we wrap this one up? Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. Bob, thanks for putting this on.